All right, good evening, everyone. So, to continue with the chapter that is the Bird Week, which is from 5th of November to 12th of November. This is the fourth lecture that we are having today. It's by Kuldeep Chowdhury, one of our very good friends and a photographer. So Kuldeep is actually a management student. Did his MBA and he's an excellent photographer and he works for Autocar India. And he's basically a automotive car photographer, and whenever he gets time he definitely moves that lens from the mechanical birds to the avian birds. He's one of the very few people who takes time to click these birds. uh, Definitely an added advantage that he has is he stays in an area which is full of biodiversity in and around his place. So he just roams around the area, that is Vasai, Virar, all the places, and he keeps on clicking birds in the local or his locality. He believes that enhancing or rather showcasing the locality and showcasing the local birds as well as the local biodiversity and wildlife is much more important than roaming around places and showing it to others. He has a blog. He has a blog on the plus he has his own Insta handle, which is Indian Blackbird. He keeps on posting photographs of birds on them. So today, as you know, that many people are having these digital cameras. They also have point and shoot cameras, and has been a lot of revolution in the camera technology as well. But apart from all of these, there is something which drives him uh, for clicking these birds is the passion that he has for photography as well as the birds. Overall, if you see, he has seen a huge number of birds. He is an avid mountaineer and he has climbed some beautiful peaks, and he keeps on sending us pictures. And whenever we meet, we keep on discussing a lot of about birding. Uh, Kuldeep has been into birding for last almost 10 years, and he has seen really wonderful places like Assam, Uttarakhand, North Bengal, some wonderful pictures that he has. So today he's going to show us a journey of bird photography. He's not going to go into too much of detail as he said, but some things which will be very interesting, some things that you people want to ask him. Definitely, I would like you people to ask him certain things about photography, which is his expertise. You can ask him after the lecture is over. So by that time, you can mute yourself. Please see to it that you don't disturb him. Uh, so over to you, Kuldeep, for a wonderful journey of bird photography.
Thank you, Aditya, for that wonderful introduction. I am assuming I'm audible, loud and clear, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so let's begin. As Adi said that I will. It's an overview. I won't be going too much into the details of the photography as such, the technical aspects of it. But hope if I can inspire some of you or at least one of you through my pictures by the end of the presentation, I guess I'll consider this as a success. So yeah, an introduction to bird photography. What the talk is going to be all about. So the brief overview of it, it's like I'll tell you about the joy of bird photography. Why taking pictures or making pictures of birds is such a joyful thing to do. What makes a great bird photo? The elements that go into it. Where to go? If you're new to birding, so maybe I've listed a few places around Bombay, so we'll go through that, and then some field techniques. I'll briefly touch upon what shutter speed and how do you manage your ISOs and the basic settings of a camera. Moving on. So yeah, what makes bird photography so great? Why is such a joyful thing to do? Uh, as the title suggests, it is a challenge. Like birds are small, right? I mean, most of them. If you consider warblers, they are one of the smallest bird species, and they are fast-moving objects. They don't really stay at a perch, for more than a second or two. They're constantly moving here and there. And you can never get too close, because they have a better vision than us human beings, right? So they obviously spot you before you spot them, and they fly away. The lighting conditions are always challenging. Maybe at times you see a bird flying in from a very bright lighting condition, and then it perches in a shade, because bird tend to prefer little shadow. So then how do you manage your exposure? So that's also challenging.
Kuldeep,
So eventually, yeah.
Can you go full screen mode?
One sec. Yeah, I'll just change it. Hold on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the light is always challenging. A bird sort of flies in from a very bright sunlight and then perches into a shade. So how do you then manage your exposure? So that's also a challenge. So basically, bird photography sort of pushes your skill and the camera's technology to its fullest, unlike any other field. Macro to an extent you can still manage, because insects don't really sort of fly away. They're there, and mammals also, they are sort of slow. But if you compare bird photography to other sort of aspects of wildlife, it's extremely tough. And after having said this, when you end up getting a beautiful photograph, it's extremely rewarding. So let's just move on to the next slide. What makes a great bird photograph? Okay. But this was shot in Gajaldova, that's in North Bengal. This was my last birding trip, in fact, just before the lockdown was announced. Yeah, so the first thing is subject. So birds are colorful, right? So, you need to show the colors to its, I guess, optimum. You have to make the optimum use of their colors. So we need to make sure that the birds are colorful. This is, by the way, it's a red billed green magpie that's also shot in North Bengal, Lajpanchor. For example, this red bill Leothrix, again, extremely colorful bird. So of course, colors help a lot. You need to have these vibrant photographs of beautiful birds. And of course, something like a peafowl always sort of catches attention. We all get excited. We've all sort of grown up listening to all these memories of our childhood. But having said that, and then yeah, of course, like this blue-eared kingfisher that was shot in Konkan. So color plays a lot in making a good photograph. You have to have a color, sort of a correct exposure, so that basically you have to show the color and sort of maximize its beauty when you're making a photograph. But having said that, color is not the only thing. Your skill then comes in when you shoot ordinary birds as well. That's where you sort of differentiate yourself from, say, rest of the people. Like, how do you show even an ordinary bird and making it look different? That's where your skill lies as a bird photographer. uh, Something as sort of as common as a crow can be made to look, maybe, if I have to say, like an eagle. You have to sort of then understand sort of its behavior and how it flies and all that, and sort of try and make it look different than like a normal bird sitting on a perch. Then that's just a boring photo. And even pigeons, for example, compose it in a way that you have not seen it before. So when you're making a picture, you have to sort of dig into your own memory, that what kind of photo I have not seen of a particular bird, and maybe try and then showcase through your photo, make a photo that's not been seen before. So not to ignore basically even the ordinary or common birds that we see in our surroundings, or even a black Durango for that matter. So it's just a black bird, there's no other color in it, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't photograph it. Try to use light to your advantage, and then make a different photograph that you've not seen before. That is where your skill lies. The next part is composition. How do you then compose? Excuse me. Putting a bird right in the center of the frame is not really desirable. It's not pleasing to the eye. So you need to then understand what are the rule of thirds and the golden spiral. So basically, this is a general guideline, by the way, that it doesn't really mean that you need to follow all these rules every time. I'll show you the examples also of it later. So what rule of third suggests is, you see these intersecting lines here. So if you basically, it means that if you place your subject on any of these four dotted lines, along the dotted lines, you make it a visually more appealing or a compelling photograph than putting the bird, right in the center of the frame. On the right hand side is golden spiral. Again, if you see the design, basically if you keep the bird in that curve, along the curve anywhere, again, it's a more visually appealing photograph than putting it right in the center or somewhere in the corner. So this is just a guideline. We'll see examples of both, and of course, how to break the rules and yet make a photograph beautiful. So this is an Indian pond heron. Of course, it follows the rule of third. Hello, Adi, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, this is an Indian pond heron, again shot in Vasai. So if you can, go back to this diagram, and then move on to the photos, you see it's sort of following the rule of third. It's placed along those dotted lines, and you got breathing space on your left. So basically, the direction in which the heron is approaching. If you sort of can visualize, if I had kept the heron right in the center of the frame, it wouldn't have been as appealing as it is right now. This is a crested serpent eagle, again shot in Latpanchor. It follows the rule of third. I've placed it in the left hand side of the frame and it's sort of looking towards right. So there's a breathing space again. Or a sort of flock of marsh sandpipers. This was shot in Ran of Kutch. So if you see how it divides the frame, now the subject has been placed in the center, but the way it divides, like the foreground is equally divided. The proportion of the foreground and the background is very much similar. And then there's the subject is in the center. So again, sort of it's breaking the rule. Just because the subject is in the center doesn't mean that it won't be an appealing photograph. Okay, the next thing that makes or breaks your photo is the background. This is an oriented Praken cone shot in Bhigwan, outskirts of Pune. Okay, so you really need to make sure that you separate the bird from its background and it doesn't get lost. So the one way you can do is sort of go down to its eye level. When you don't go down to its eye level, it gives a controlling perspective, as if you are superior than the bird, which is not the ideal way to photograph a bird. Now, I understand when you're in the forest, getting an eye level is not possible because we are not a monkey, right? I mean, although we do come from apes, we can't climb the trees and make the pictures. But whenever you're shooting, say, shore birds or wetland birds or ground dwelling birds, try to go to their level and then make a photograph. Again, this is a common babbler shot on the outskirts in the Ran of Kutch. Again, it's sort of perched very close to us. So what happens is when the bird, the distance between the subject and the background, okay, when there's a farther distance, then it's easier to throw the background off, basically, to make those creamy, smooth looking background. And then again, the distance between you and the subject also matters, and then your aperture settings. But I won't go too much into the aperture and the camera settings. The babbler was perched right in front of us, maybe less than 5 feet, if I'm not wrong. And I really struggled to put the bird, in the frame because I was carrying a prime lens, so there was no way I could have possibly zoomed out from a car. But yeah, the distance sort of helped, and the bird was separated from the background. Again, this is the red-crested pochard shot in Gajaldoba in North Bengal. We were in the boat ride. So I was carrying a 600 mm lens, which is a very heavy lens. And going down to a bird level in a boat is not really possible, but I tried my best. In fact, if any further, down, and I would have sort of sunk my lens, which I didn't want to do. But I tried my best to go down to its level and throw the background off. Again, this is a white-spotted fantail shot in my backyard. Again, I've tried to go down to its level and try and throw the background off as much as possible. This is a gray bustard, again a classic example of bird sort of perching right close to you and helping the background sort of throwing it off, and it separates it also from the background. The third part is and to an extent, I think it's the most essential part if you have to make a great bird photo. At times, having a background not thrown off is also an ideal sort of way. But if you have some sort of behavior captured, it may be a flight shot or it's sort of feeding itself or preening, it makes a more compelling photograph than just bird sitting on a perch. So this is the white-spotted swordtail feeding its cheek. Now this was not the first sort of visual that we came across. We were driving along, we saw a stream in Satal, and we thought, okay, maybe this looks like an ideal habitat for a dipper or a forktail, to be spotted. So we got down, we went down to the stream, and we saw this forktail. It was going behind, coming back again, going back. It did that I think for 3 or 4 times, and then that's sort of when we figured out that there might be something else, than to its flight than just sort of going back and forth. So we investigated, we went further behind, and then we sort of found that it had a chick there, like a very juvenile bird. It was feeding the insects. Those flights to and fro was to feed the chick, and we were able to sort of make this photograph there. This is a SNU again. We spotted this Gajaldoba wetland. So we were again, in a boat trying to sort of spot as many birds as possible, and we around the bush sort of we came a little closer to it. We didn't plan to, but we couldn't see the bird in fact. And when the boat sort of took a turn, and it came right in front of us. And of course, this is not the ideal way to see a bird. It sort of got frightened by our presence, and then it suddenly took off. But then it helped, that you have your presence of mind and know the bird behavior, and then sort of have your reflexes in place, and then take a picture. This is a black-shouldered kite, again a very chance encounter. Luck plays a very major role. In fact, I was birding in my backyard. There was about, I think, 10:30 in the morning. I was birding for about 4 hours. Nothing happened. I just found a shade, and I went and just stopped there, sort of took a breather. And basically the black-shouldered kite with a skink, it had made a kill of a skink. It came and landed right in front of me. I really didn't have to do much, but maybe the fact that I was hidden under a shade could have helped. For me, the thing that makes a photograph, basically it's the way the skink is positioned. If you imagine the skink in any other position, if it had not been in this position, it wouldn't have been as appealing. I mean, I understand that it's made a kill, it's a behavioral photograph, but personally, if the position of the skink, it's in the way it's been eaten, sort of makes the photograph for me. Now, this is a red-breasted merganser female. This is also, in fact, a very chanced upon photograph, and I didn't notice the heart shape when I actually took the photo. In fact, when I came back home and I was post-processing the photos, that's when I saw that, oh, there's a heart shape. Because we were in a boat and the current was too strong. So we were, sort of the boat was shaking a lot. So I just happened to catch some other behavior and then make a photograph of it. And then realizing it later that, yeah, there's something else also, than the merganser just flapping its wing. So at times, don't delete your photographs again, when you, take them out in the field and onto the camera. Basically, come back home, sit down, relax, go through your photos on your computer, and then you might just realize that, okay, there's something else, there's some surprising element that's there. So that's the story behind this. Yeah, these are Himalayan griffins. I photographed them in China on my road trip from India to Paris. So again, a very chanced encounter. We were just driving along and we saw at least 20-25 vultures sort of fighting over a carcass of a dog. And to be honest, I didn't really have the ideal lens for birding. I just had my 70-300. But the fact that they were right next to the road and very much sort of familiar with the human presence, that they let me approach closer. So even though I didn't have the ideal lens, I could make this photo. Again, like I said, the luck plays a very major part. And if you do look at it carefully, the griffin that's on top, it's actually pinning down the other vulture. Its feet are actually on its neck and trying to sort of pin him down. So again, yeah, this is a silhouette of a Eurasian griffin, shot in the Rann of Kutch again. We were on our way back from a birding session, and we spotted this. I had to sort of tell the guide to turn the Jeep around, because I had a silhouette in mind, because I knew the sun had already set. So there's no way to make a normal photo, a perfectly well exposed photo. So you have to understand the light and the situation, and then sort of form the photo in your mind before you even take a picture at times. So I knew I had to make a silhouette. Flight is just again a chance photograph that I got, that I decided to fly away. But I just had a sort of a silhouette in my mind against, a yellow, very vibrant looking evening sky. But yeah, again, luck played a very major part, and it decided to fly away, and I got a photo. Now, speaking of behavioral photos, this is a very sort of ordinary photo of a black-shouldered kite perched, on a pole. But then what again makes this photo, it's a different kind of behavior that the black-shouldered kite is showcasing. This tail flickering is actually a territorial display. What it's trying to, sort of say to other black-shouldered kite that is there in the area, that this is my territory, maybe do not come, anywhere closer. So even though it's just a bird, sitting on a perch, not doing much, just a tail flickering, makes it a wonderful photo or a different photo, to be honest. So try and notice all these behavioral aspects of the bird and try and document them as well, and just sort of birds in flight or anything else for that matter. This is a common kingfisher. I have this photo in the presentation because this is a very special photograph for me, shot on a very basic equipment. I made this photo in 2011 on a Nikon D90 and a very slow 70-300 lens. Very, very basic kit, not considered ideal at all in any way for bird photography. It just so happened, that I was there for, I think, about 3 hours or so, and the kingfisher got so comfortable with me that it started diving on a very frequent basis, and taking sort of a longer pause and waiting to see if I have disappeared, I've gone. But yeah, it became a little comfortable with my presence there. So patience paid off, and it's actually one of the 2 frames that I've photographed. In the other frame, it's that kingfisher is sort of going away from the. It's going little up ahead in the left-hand side corner. So, but that it's also not that much of a sharper photo, because the camera being a very slow FPS camera, it's only a 5 frames per second camera. But this is the sharpest frame that I've got, and yeah, this has to be one of the best photos that I've made on a very sort of very limited capability gear. So don't let the gear hold yourself back. Just because you don't have a gear doesn't mean that you can't make a photo. You have to be relentless, go out there in the field, and you never know, nature might just sort of surprise you. This is a steppe eagle again, about to take off in Run of Kutch. We were sort of done taking its sort of boring shots that it's perched on the ground, not doing much. And I think it also sort of decided that, yeah, it got bored and decided to take off. And maybe we were in a position, and birds tend to sort of give slight hints when they are about to take off. One of the common factor being it sort of on occasions decides to poop before it takes off. So pay attention to all these signs that the bird is giving, and you might just be in for a luck and a photo also. This is a Baya weaver, male returning to its nest. The female had come to inspect it. Again, shot in my backyard. I didn't really have to travel much. I was observing it, of course, for quite some time, that they are building the nest. And I just one fine morning, I went there, spent about a couple of hours, and made sort of multiple pictures, but this being the best of the lot. Now, again, speaking of behavior, these are brown-headed gulls attacking a great egret for an easy catch. So pay attention to all these things. Crows also tend to attack other birds a lot. Yeah. Next is again a territorial fight of little egrets. Early morning, they are quite active and tend to fight a lot for territory. So pay attention to that. I call this a ballet. It's not really actually a ballet. It's a territorial fight between 2 egrets. Yeah. So next is reflections. Reflections play again a major part. if you have a water body and a bird is being reflected, try to incorporate that reflection into your photo. So imagine a photo without a reflection, it's just a boring photo of a bird. But if you can sort of add a reflection in it, if it's available there, compose it in a way that it makes it interesting. So this, again, it's a wood sandpiper. If you look at the reflection, it's so perfect that if I turn the image upside down, if I rotate it, you wouldn't sort of know which one is a reflection and which one is a bird actually. So yeah, this one is a lesser whistling teal again. Very graphical image if you can see, and of course, reflection again making it the photograph that it is. Without the reflection, it's just a boring photo. Again, a ruby-breasted crake. So basically, just because you have a focal length and you can zoom in onto the bird doesn't mean that you need to go all the way, and just have the bird in the frame. Compose it in a way where if you again can see the reflections and sort of zoom out a bit and try and have a wider sort of perspective where the habitat of the bird is also seen. So as you can see here, ruby-breasted crake it's found around reed beds. Then the next section is environmental shots. Also, we like to call it as habitat shots, where the bird is seen where it is, and not just a bird perched on a photo. You get to sort of have a sense of its surroundings. So these are lesser flamingos shot in Shivri, back when the work at Shivri had not begun. Early morning shot again, bird silhouetted, so it gives a nice sense of sort of the habitat and a mood also. This is a white-browed scimitar bawla, again shot in Latpanchor, North Bengal. So if I had gone a little closer, it wouldn't have had the same impact. Now you can see the kind of flower that it's perching, it's perched upon, and you can sort of have a sense of its surroundings and its habitat. If I had gone closer, you might have sort of missed out on the flower and the habitat also. Now this is a plain mountain finch. Now imagine this frame without the other pines, the branches that are there in the photo. It's just a boring photo otherwise. So sort of taking a step back and maybe try and incorporate other elements that are there in the photograph, sort of makes it or breaks it at times. Now this is a common stone chat. I purposely decided it doesn't really follow again the rule of third. If you can sort of refer back to the slide that I had showed. It's a habitat shot of a stone chat. I've purposely zoomed out a bit, didn't go too close because I didn't want to sort of have a boring photo. It's a different photo because I've composed it in a way where you can see that it's a grassland in the background. So you get to have a sense of where the bird is found. Again, a blue throat, very similar composition, wide, and trying to show its habitat also where it's found. Again, basically the stone chat was shot on the right hand side, and this is actually on the left hand side. This was made at I think an interval of 5 minutes. Same habitat again. So try and have a sense of the habitat also, not just a bird perched on a photo and a very zoomed in photo. After a point, it just makes it a boring photo to look at. This is a juvenile brown dipper, again shot in the similar habitat where the spotted forktail was photographed feeding its cheek. So we spotted the forktail first and then went little ahead and got the dipper. What made this photograph, in fact, is just that one streak of light falling on it through the canopy up on the basically from the rock. Had the sunlight not been there, it would have been a boring photo, to be honest. Just a bird, with not doing much. It's just the sunlight coming through the canopy makes it a different photo. Now, needless to say, we all know these are lesser flamingos. This is also, again, a very chanced encounter. We had gone for a survey and we'd done a survey and it was 11 o'clock. High tide had come in and they just, instead of flying away, they just decided to sort of float in the water for a while. And, I could make this photo. So again, sort of sticking around when you feel that, nothing can be now done in the field. I don't think I can even make a photo and maybe I should just pack up and go. But maybe at times you shouldn't. If you wait a little more and something might just happen. So it's a very chanced encounter. Again, this is a rufous-necked hornbill, shot in Latpanchor. again, I mean, I've gone a little wider just to give you a sense of where the bird is found. You can see the mountains in the background. So it's found in a mountainous region up there in Latpanchor. Had I sort of zoomed in a little bit on the bird, you would have lost the sense of the surroundings also. Again, this is again a chance encounter of lesser flamingos. I don't have to really explain too much. The wing position of the different wing position of all the three flamingos sort of gives makes this a different photo. Had this been another wing position, it wouldn't have been that great. But it sort of gives you a surrounding perspective, perspective of the surrounding. You can see the mangroves in the back, and you see the buildings at Airoli, and then there's a hill. So, where the bird is usually seen, it gives you a sense of that, and that helps, in making this photo instead of just a tight shot of a single flamingo. Okay, this is Eurasian curlews and whimbrels. Whimbrels are basically the birds that are crossing each other in the foreground, whereas curlews are there in the background. Again, I've gone little wide, didn't decide to compose it in a way where just whimbrels are seen. I wanted to have a different formation of the group. So, I approached it in a way where I can have the entire group in the frame and not just one bird. And it just so happens that it sort of mirrors, if you compare the left hand side and the right hand side, the birds are in fact mirroring each other. So that's what makes this a photo. Okay, the next part is, having explained the rules, and you would have sort of followed the rules also for a while in the field. But then there comes a time when you're just bored following the rules and you want to make something. Eventually it's a creative field. You have to break away from the rules and, sort of make something, bending the rules as they call it. So this is a female of blue rock thrush. Again, composition wise, if you can imagine, if I had gone a little closer, if I had placed the bird, either in the bottom half of the frame or even on the left or the right, wouldn't have made this photo. It had to be placed right in the center. So that's what I did, and it works. So it's not that just because it's been composed in a way right in the center of the frame doesn't mean that it can't be a good photo. So again, Himalayan griffin shot in China. They were fighting over a carcass, and this bird that I was actually could sort of look through my viewfinder, like it was staring at me, and I had to compose it in the center of the frame so that the entire attention goes onto the bird and not anywhere else. So basically, center composition is sort of advisable when you have to draw the viewer's attention onto a certain subject and nowhere else. That's when sort of it's advisable to have a center, the bird composing the center of the frame. Now it again, it's a northern shoveler taking off, compose again right into place, right in the center of the frame. Doesn't really follow the rule of third or golden spiral. But what makes this photo is that there are two marsh sandpipers, if you can see on both the sides. So basically, having a bird right in the center of the frame, it's sort of guarded by two sandpipers on the side. So just because it's again composed in the center of the frame doesn't mean that it's a bad photo. Of course, it has a behavior, it's taking off, and then two marsh sandpipers on the side. So that helps the composition. Again, these are lesser flamingos. I've gone little slow, not little slow, extremely slow on the shutter. So usually what people tend to have is higher shutter speed and freezing the bird in its action. Every wingtip is sharp and crisp. Of course, that's a beautiful photograph. I'm not denying it. But at times you also need to experiment with the settings and try and come up with something different. So I went slightly slower on the shutter speed and got this motion blur, and it gives a very painterly effect, and that's what I like about this photo. Again, little egret taking off. Of course, this has not been shot in black and white, but I had actually imagined it when I shot it, that I want to have this photo converted to black and white because there was nothing else happening. Egret is white and the grass was all yellow. So color wise, the color scheme wasn't really working. And then and there when I shot the photo, I thought, yeah, maybe this might just work in black and white. So again, it sort of takes me back to the processing aspect of it, not to ignore the processing. It plays a major part in your wildlife photography or body photography. And especially when you're doing black and white images, don't just sort of do it because the color doesn't work, so I'll just try and convert into black and white and let's see if it works. So it doesn't really work that way. If you can visualize it, if you can train your eyes and brain to see in black and white, that is much more advisable, to do it beforehand and to see how it will, pan out. Of course, you can't exact sort of pan out, what the result will be, but at least have a broader idea of how the frame will look in black and white. So that helps. If you can train yourself before you, learn the processing, is I guess the way to go for me. Again, a Bartel Godwit, sort of a very boring frame color-wise. It was a very gloomy day, very diffuse light. Nothing much was happening. There was just this bird and with an ocean in the background. So that's when I thought, yeah, maybe this might again work in black and white because there's nothing else that I can sort of incorporate into it in color-wise and make it visually appealing. So again, I had to convert into black and white, and I had already sort of thought of it that this will work in black and white. So don't shy away, because I had sort of told you earlier that the color makes it, a very interesting sort of, aspect of bird photography. But just because there is no color, that doesn't mean that it's a bad photo, right? A black and white frame also works. Again, a classic example of placing the bird right in the center and shooting silhouettes. Silhouettes also sort of it makes a very interesting time to shoot bird pictures. Having a sort of a graphic object in your frame and place it in the center. Just because there is no sunlight now or the sun has set, that doesn't mean that you should hang up your camera and stop shooting. This was on a way back. We had I think gone to Nal Sarovar, and I could see this blackwing still still feeding, and I thought, yeah, silhouette is the way to go. This might make a beautiful photograph. So yeah, so next being a Montagu Harrier and an Indian wild ass. This was again shot in the run of Kutch. So we had done taking up pictures of the Montagu Harrier. There was not much that we could do because birds sort of in the evening, harriers come there to just perch, and roost. They don't do much. But then that's when I sort of saw that the Indian wild ass, it's sort of approaching the harrier, and I thought that it might enter the frame the way I wanted it to, and it just so happened that it did. What makes a photo from me, it's the head position of the harrier and of the Indian wild ass. Had it not been any of it, it wouldn't have been so much of an interesting photo. The way the harrier is looking on the side, and then the wild ass is either looking at me or at the harrier, but then just the head position of these two sort of animals make the photo. So again, it just takes me back to the point that not to compress too much or not to have a very tight frame, sort of it's better to step back a bit and have a sense of surroundings, and you might just get this interesting photo. Okay, so the next slide, where to see birds in Mumbai. These are just places that I have seen personally. If you are in New Mumbai region, there's Kharghar Hills, the NRI colony at Seawoods, or Valley Park at CPD Belapur, or the Airoli Mangrove Center. So these are good places to watch birds in New Mumbai region. If you're in the central part of Mumbai, then there's Bhopal, there's Haji Malang, Padle, Bhandup pumping station again, and Thane Creek. If you're on the western side, there's Nagla Block, of course, our national park at Borivali. There are plenty of habitats in Vasai, and then there's Tungareshwar Wildlife Sanctuary on the east side on the highway. I'm just going to touch upon the sort of briefly what techniques that need to be used, especially sort of birds in flight. Birds like to take off and land into the wind, so you really need to when you're out in the field, you need to judge what sort of direction the wind is coming in. If you want bird facing you and landing, then you need to make sure that you place the wind behind you and not in front of you. If you want a side profile of the bird that's taking off or landing, you need to make sure that the wind is on your sides, either left or right. Just a general shutter speed guide, it depends on the size of bird and the distance also. So if something like an eagle is flying, you probably need, provided that the light is good, you probably need around 1600 to 2000 sort of shutter speed. If you say photographing a pigeon, or a fast flying, say a kingfisher for that matter. So you might need a slightly higher shutter speed, say about 2,400 to about 3,200. So this is just a general guide. Small birds tend to fly fast, whereas if it's a bigger bird, it tends to fly slower. Again, the metering pattern for if you're using a Nikon camera, then put it on matrix. If you're using a Sony, then it's a multi-pattern. Canon, put it on an evaluative metering. I tend to sort of use manual plus auto ISO as my settings, say about 60 to 70% of the time. What it means is I tend to decide my aperture and my shutter speed, and I let the camera decide what the ISO is going to be. You don't really have time when you're shooting out there in the field to change all these settings. So it's better that I fix my shutter speed and I fix my aperture, the depth of field and all that. It sort of let that gets decided by me and let the camera decide the ISO. And then again, the focus settings. So if you're shooting a bird which is fast moving, or even though it's perched, it's doing some sort of movements, it's better to go on autofocus continuous. If it's just perched, not doing much, use the single point autofocus. And if it's actually doing some activity, if it's flying, coming back, then having a group or dynamic autofocus for birds in flight helps a lot. What's in my bag, as quite a few people are sort of interested, in asking. So the camera that I am using currently is the Nikon D850. I have two lenses, the Nikkor 200-500 5.6 and the 600mm f4. It's a very heavy lens. It's a 7 kg lens. So you really need a monopod. You can't shoot it beyond, say, about 20 or 30 second handheld. You really have to have a monopod. I have a Celestron Outland binocular that I have been using since past 10 years. It's working just fine. And it's essential to have a binocular when you're there in the field. Try to look at the bird from your binocs, before you even place the viewfinder or the camera to your eye. Learn to sort of notice the bird and what it's doing. Try to ID it from the binocular first before you even take pictures. That's not the way to go, where you take the picture and try to ID it later, when you go home. Having again a field guide is extremely essential. You tend to then ID the bird then and there. It helps a lot. So this is what I usually carry in my bag. Along with there are other miscellaneous items such as the camera cleaning kit and memory cards and spare batteries. So yeah, I'm just going to talk briefly about the app that we have here. So as a wildlife photographer or a bird photographer or a nature photographer, when you're making pictures, you're consuming. Nature is giving it to you, right? But then, end of the day, it's our responsibility to give it back to the society. In one form or the other. I don't know. You can be, part of some, say, wildlife department and doing surveys for them. There are various ways to contribute. So what we decided back in 2015 that when we had reached around 200 species for the area, we thought of coming up with this app called Vasai Birds. So I'm just going to talk briefly about the app. It's a very user-friendly app. And it's only on Android as of now. We are working on the iOS version. It's a free app. So when you download it, this is the home screen on the left-hand side. You have the categories. We've sort of classified in 4 categories, broad basis. There's aquatic birds, birds of prey, forest and grassland birds, and garden birds. So when you tap on it, you will get to see different categories of bird. When you can also search the bird by its color. As you can see in the second photo, blackish, bluish, greenish. At times, what happens is when you're new to the field, you don't really understand. You don't know the name of the bird. You can sort of then describe. I saw it was brown in color, or it had yellow under the throat. So I've categorized it by the color and its size also. But lack of space, I didn't include size. But then size contains kite, eagle, pigeon, or bulbul. These are the broader sizes basically. You can also make your checklist when you're out in the field and upload it to eBird. So basically what you need to do, you just need to, as you're walking along, you see, say, for example, a crow. Then you type in, house crow, and then it gets added. And then you add the name of the place where you're at. And it, picks up the coordinates and, gives you the name of the place, and then you save it, and then you can upload it on eBird also. We've added a bird quiz just to make it a little more fun. You get to see 4 options and you see the photo of the bird. You then have to choose. Of course, you don't win any prize, but just to make it a little more exciting. Then there's a section on habitats, the habitats that we as a team have been able to track in the past 10 odd years now. It also has GPS coordinates built in it. So if you're driving and if you want to say, if you have to go to Vasai Fort, for example, so you just type it on view and map, so it gives you a direction to go there. It also has bird topography. So when you're out in, as you get older into the birding field, you no longer use the like a common man nomenclature. You tend to use terms such as rum or say ear coverts or primaries, all that. So basically, what is called what, that's also been there added, and it also has so bird ethics. As you explore the app further, you will find what are the do's and don'ts of the birding when you're out there in the field, and also has brief info about what the team is, and our brief info about the app and all that. So as you explore more, you will find it a little more interesting. So do download it and let us know how do you find it, and if you can suggest some improvements, then yeah, more than welcome. This is my contact details. If you want to follow me on social media, it's Indian Blackbird, as Aditya mentioned in the beginning of the introduction itself. If you want to email me, if you have some doubts regarding photography or camera, you can feel free to ask. It's images.kuldeep@gmail.com. So yep, thank you, and I think I'm able to cover a little bit. And if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to ask.
So those who have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay, so before anyone asks a question, I would like to ask Kuldeep that so these are a lot of students here who are in first year, second year, and third year BSc, as well as some of the students are in their MSc. So the if they start bird photography, what is the basic thing that they should have? As you said, your kit contains all these things. What is the basic that they should do to get into birding?
Okay, so first and foremost, having a field guide and a binocs is a must, irrespective of whether you just want to bird or be a bird photographer. Of course, because of how easy the cameras are these days to acquire. Of course, you want to have a photo for your for your own memory. So of course, everyone wants to take a beautiful photo of a bird. So a binocs and a field guide is a must again. As far as the cameras are concerned, you really need to decide how much budget you have, how much you want to put in initially. But somewhere between I think 35 to 40 grand, you get to have a good camera deals these days, where you get a wide angle lens and a telephoto lens as a part of the kit, and a decent performing camera also. So the budget plays a very crucial role as to how much you want to spend initially. But then again, if you're just starting it out, I don't really advise you to spend everything on the word go. It's better to understand the camera first, how it functions, master what you have, the lenses, trying to make better pictures on what you have, than having basically invested in the gear at first and then realizing it later that it's just a waste of an investment. You can always acquire gear later once you learn to take pictures. So learn to take pictures first on the basic gears, and then we can upgrade yourself gradually.
Right. So as you have said, as you have also mentioned some places in and around Mumbai. Like, suppose tomorrow there are a few students who want to go for birding. What are the ethics that they would like to follow, or what is the basic ethics they should follow when they're doing birding?
First thing first that comes up, as we we all know that wear earthen colors, not to wear too flashy colors. Don't go in bigger groups. Try to maintain a silence as much as possible. Learn to listen to the bird calls, and what nature is doing. Then I guess not to have a continuous call playback just so that you get to see the bird. When you have a call playback, try and sort of use it in a way where it doesn't bother the bird too much. When you know that it's bird is being bothered, at times I totally understand that you have to when you go to certain regions you have to play a bird call so that you get to see a bird, but then don't do it over and over again. You know where the bird is harassed basically, so not to harass the wildlife, and your photos can wait. The bird or the animal's well-being is always first and foremost and of more important than your photo. Your photos, it's okay at times even if you don't get a photo. So yeah, these are the things I think one should adhere to. It's like a must do. There's no two ways about it.
Yes. Anybody else want to ask any questions? You're open for any discussion. So either they have understood everything or they have understood nothing.
I hope the first one is true than the latter.
Yeah. Thank you, Kuldeep, so much for that wonderful talk. It was really wonderful to have you today. And of course, once you people should go with Kuldeep for birding, and then you will know the passion and the drive that he has for birding. Sitting here in a room during the lockdown, he was so much in stress that he actually started window birding and terrace birding. And even there, he could find a lot of birds. Of course, the place that he belongs to is, he the social distancing and everything is maintained, and he does birding sometimes in and around his place. Uh, but thank you, Kuldeep, for that wonderful talk. It was really fantastic to give a very short as well as very beautiful insight into how one should do birding as well as photography of birds. Some very nice and quick tips about bird photography. They were really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. And we hope to meet you in person. Once the college starts, we plan to have one or the other trail in Bhuigaon or Tulskadi with you, as well as Varun, who is there, as well as all our Viva team members who are there. Definitely,
Yeah,
we'll
definitely.
have a
Yeah.
nice birding trip there. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
I think someone has a question. Huh.
yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if for birding photography, is
Mhm.
it only for hobby? And I don't know much about the career options in that.
Okay. That's a
Yeah,
good
so I
question.
wanted to know more about the career and what more we could do.
Okay. That's a lovely question. First thing first, thank you for asking. Well, I am doing it as a hobby. Most of the photographers that are there, I'm just talking in broader terms, wildlife photographers that are there in India. Very few have, managed to make this as a career, doing it full time. Most of them are sort of doing it as a hobby on the side. Some of them have, the senior photographers that we look up to, they have worked for about 20, 25 years and then, have made enough money to sort of have the financial backup and then turn wildlife photography as their career. Uh, it's a very tricky thing to do. If you can crack it, then nothing like it. But it's better to always have, something else as a backup. Having a plan B always helps than just sort of going, blindly into something. And of course, I mean, if you have the drive and passion, nothing can stop you. But try and have it as a hobby, before you are sure that, yeah, this can be made into a profession. This is my advice for you, to at least to start with. There are very few avenues that way. There are very few wildlife magazines that are there. So that that also work on freelance basis. There's a story done on a particular species, and you happen to have the photo, then you can maybe sell your photos to these magazines, and then you get paid. But then, considering the time and money you invest in it, the option is sort of far off. So yeah, try to start it as a hobby. Give your best and make pictures, and then eventually, if you're successful and have that confidence in you, then you can maybe think of making it as a.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
Okay.
sacrifice.
Yeah. Along with that, yes. if you're into birding, you can make a small career into it. That, as Kuldeep just said, there are a lot of avenues now open with bird photography, bird tourism, and people are getting into all sort of tourism related to wildlife. Of course, you need to have,
Even
which is very important in
photography competitions also you can look, into. But then, there are thousands of photographers submitting pictures for every competition. So you can't really have, that as a career option. If you have a very unique photo and you end up, winning a prize, nothing like it. But then, that sort of can't be your bread and butter. It's just one of the avenues that, as Aditya mentioned, like, bird tourism and taking pictures for and taking people for bird walks, of course. But then it's sort of bird photography and birding, they sort of go hand in hand. It sort of feeds into each other. Uh, Solely bird photography as a career is not something that is practiced in India, at least.
Yes, very true.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kuldeep,
you're
just
welcome.
one more question, which is come in the chat box. Can
Sure.
we have a workshop, a on-field workshop on bird photography with you?
Yeah, of course. I'm always open to impart as much knowledge that I have.
So when
So
we'll
maybe
scale,
as a college, I think opens and maybe you can coordinate better, and then we could maybe have sort of a Sunday or a Saturday, go to say one of our habitats in Vasai and maybe have a sort of an on-field workshop over there.
very true.
I'm all game. I'm open.
Okay,
Would like-
okay. Yes, sure. So, Kuldeep, thank you so much from the Nature Club of SIES College, and
Yeah,
thank you so much for being there today for us. And we look forward
always,
to
always. Yeah.
meeting you in
Thank you very much
person
for
at our
inviting.
small workshop.
Sure. Thanks a lot for inviting me, and stay safe and hope to see you soon in field.
Yeah, sure. Same here. Yeah, thank you
Sure.
so much, everyone. And tomorrow we have a lecture by Amay Ketkar on nocturnal birds again at 6 o'clock in the evening. I'll send an invite in some time. Do join, all of you. Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Aditya. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for joining.